Audio is good,
Okay,
right,
perfect.
Lloyd?
Sorry. I will soon tell you why I'm here in a cabin in the woods and what's
Please tell
happening.
us why you're in the cabin and at a cabin in the woods. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, what's the topic today? What is our coffee chat about? Because
I mean,
stuff is happening.
we're
Stuff is
talking about
happening.
lady stuff. Sorry, Lloyd, you might have to plug your ears, but we're talking about vaginas.
Do you
Yes.
remember me telling you that it doesn't matter? I'm okay.
You're
This is
okay?
educational for him.
Yes.
It is educational. Well, the thing is Martha and I connected really quickly at a cocktail party at Podfest and instantly was like, I think I need to talk to you some more. But we didn't have time because it was the end of the evening. It was late. And so we just exchanged cards and then we've been in contact over email. And I just her podcast, like My Aloof Vagina, was just like it's just catching, you know? I mean, and then I started digging into it and listening to your podcast, and it's right where I'm at. So, I mean, in life, I just shared a story that I literally went to the store yesterday with Gabby before you guys got here to get, and I forgot one thing. I knew I forgot one thing, but I didn't remember the one thing that I forgot until this morning. And it was the one thing that I needed for the ingredient for the party I'm supposed to go to after I record with you guys. And I'm like, God damn it. You know, and then I also had another moment where I was meeting with my voiceover coach and I'm like, she doesn't Zoom. What does she do? I can't remember. It took me 5 minutes to remember that she likes to Skype,
Uh,
not Zoom. And I'm like,
Oh, no.
and it's brain fog, right?
yep.
That's what it
Yep.
is.
That's one of the things.
So why are you in a cabin in the middle of the woods?
So it's all old lady related. So and to be like super HIPAA compliant, I'm going to be vague about which person, but so I have a number of older women in my family. I'm really fortunate, like genetically, they live to be 100. It's very common, and many of them are single or divorced or whatever, or widowed, and a bunch of them are up here. And about a week ago, I got a call that one of them had fallen and broken her hip and was being rushed into emergency surgery.
Oh,
And I
no.
freaked out, right? I came immediately because who else is going to be here for them? So all week, it's been about old lady stuff. Like all week, I'm like, I better eat more protein at lunch. And I'm going to make time and get up early and go to the gym and lift some weights, because to see what happens just 10 years older than us or 15 or 20 years, so alarming, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't take the steps, so I'm all about longevity this week. It's everything's about hydration and longevity, but they live way up here in New Hampshire. It's gorgeous, but it's kind of out in the country. And that's why I'm here sitting on a cushion on a floor in the treehouse. This is the treehouse part of the house. So I could be away from all the other humans.
Oh my God,
That's
that's
beautiful.
awesome.
It's a very
Isn't it
nice
nice?
looking tree
Yeah.
house.
It is a nice treehouse. We're
I
proud
mean,
of
that
it.
seems like a really cool grown-up tree house. Like, I want one of those.
It
Yeah.
is a grown-up treehouse. I mean, they built it in their retirement, so it's very cool.
That's so cool. I think everybody needs a tree house for retirement for sure.
Agree.
So
So
oh my God, that's awesome. So that's been like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I think being in nature is so soothing, just like for your brain and your body. And yeah, I mean, and everybody always makes fun of me for like exercising. Like I love to exercise. I'm a big enthusiast, but I think really it's just a matter of moving my body. They're always like, oh, there she goes. She's walking. I think I'm like the dog lady because I'm always walking my dogs, but moving your body is so important, not just for the here and now, but because of like what's to come in the future. And people don't realize if you want to be able to move when you get older, you need to move now. You know, like you
yep,
need to get
Yeah.
up and just walk. Like, yeah.
you're not going to be able to pick up a fitness routine at 65 and say, well, my retirement's going to be all about fitness. By then, you've lost so much muscle mass. Now we're getting into the topics of my podcast, right?
Yeah.
But by then, because of sarcopenia, you've lost so much muscle mass that at that point, you're just retaining. So if we don't build it up, if we don't put the deposits now into the muscle bank account in our 40s and 50s, we have nothing to retain later. Unless I even start on osteoporosis and brittle bones, all those things.
Those are big words. And I know Lloyd is a big word person. And I know that he like knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with the words, but I don't know their exact meaning.
I
Well,
really,
I'll share.
yeah,
Oh, sorry.
share. No, go
Yeah.
ahead, share.
So sarcopenia is what happens to us as we get older, men and women. And it's just that your muscles decline, that you start to lose muscle mass. And it starts in our 30s. And so sarcopenia is the medical term for what looks like frailty. You know how when people get older, even big, strong people just start to look a little frail? That's
Yeah.
sarcopenia, that loss of muscle mass. And it's so important because, of course, muscle is such a metabolic part of our metabolic tissue, right? Part of our body. The osteoporosis is brittle bones. And
Yeah.
so that's the other reason people kind of start to look like this, and why a little fall onto not a very hard surface led to a broken hip, for this older woman.
Yeah.
And so osteoporosis has a lot of causes, but one of the causes is not building up your muscle enough and not putting loads on your bones enough so that your bones maintain their strength. You just kind of, if you're not doing that, our bodies are super efficient. They will
Yeah.
not waste energy building stuff we don't use.
Right.
So all of this is what we can do to prepare and maybe age a little more safely
Yeah.
and maybe not get frail so fast. But I'm here making appointments and helping the hospital and being strong and being helpful and being the young person, right? Everyone's happy that I'm here because it's like
Yeah.
company. At the same time that half my brain is now observing everything I do through this framework, because she's only about 20 years older than me. And then another one's only 18 and 15 and 12 years older. And I look and I think, I'm lying to myself if at
Yeah.
52, I think this doesn't have to be a priority every day.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
It's interesting. I want to know like how you started your podcast, because there's always a story behind, and you're a voice actor too. So we're all
Yes.
voice actors.
Yep.
So, which is amazing that you can leave and take your business with you and travel wherever you're at and do your voiceover wherever you're at, which I think
Totally.
is so cool. So that gives you the freedom to be able to do what you're doing for the older ladies in your family, which I think is cool. We need to touch on that. But like, how did
Yes.
you start My Aloof Vagina? Because I mean, I feel like that is just so niche, and I have people behind me. That's okay. And I just think it's interesting that like you're talking about things that doctors don't even talk to us about,
A
and
lot of
it's
people don't talk about it. I think our society as a whole doesn't. And it's something very important to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, so the reason my Aloof Vagina was born was because I ran into something that I didn't know was a symptom of menopause and perimenopause. And then when I went researching it, which is my nature, I freaked myself out because it was a lot worse than I thought. And it was through that journey that I recognized that I didn't really even know what to expect. I mean, I knew that you might fall and break your hip, in your 70s. And I knew that someday my period would stop. Sorry, Lloyd. My period would stop.
Okay.
And then I would get hot flashes, and maybe I'd have insomnia and maybe weight gain. Like that was it. Maybe some brain fog. I maybe was aware of that, but I had no idea how widespread the effects on our bodies are as it changes, and how many things that I didn't know about. And so my first symptom, I'm going to whisper because it's just us, right? My first symptom was I started seeing somebody after a long period of celibacy, which isn't uncommon in my life. But so maybe I'd had this symptom for years, but if a tree falls in the forest, doesn't make a sound. Like, do you
right,
have,
right.
do you have,
Yeah.
clitoral insensitivity if no one is working with your clitoris? Right? So
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
even know until there was a hot man in my bedroom. And then, um, things weren't the same. Right. And
Yeah.
then I had to
Yeah.
reflect, like, when was the last time? When was the last time you even had to use this thing? And
Right.
so, which is another challenge, right? You got to use it or lose it. And I just, I don't know. It only been a few years of me not using it at all, but it was
Yeah.
enough for me to be taken by surprise. And so there's this thing called clitoral atrophy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh,
These
It's
are
wow.
a,
big
I
words.
know, it's a
So
lot like, oh yeah.
sorry, I was gonna ask, when that first happened to you, did you think it was just you? Like it was just maybe I'm out of practice, or did you know, like, did you automatically think, oh, I'm gonna go to a gynecologist and check this out?
Yeah, I didn't know. And at first I just felt I was mad at myself and thought something was wrong with me. Like, why am I I'm like my brain was so into it and I was so into him and I
Yeah.
mean, I don't mind giving the whole story. I was having orgasms, but it just was harder and it felt like just not as I just wasn't as sensitive. And then I wasn't having orgasms with intercourse anymore, which was
Yeah.
something I had always
Oh,
been able to do. And so he knew that we'd had a past. So he's thinking it's something right that
Yeah.
he's doing wrong. I
yeah.
know he's not doing anything wrong. So I'm overcompensating and freaking out about not performing. It was weird. It
Right.
was almost like being a guy and having ED, right? I had this self-consciousness about not performing the way I wanted to.
Right.
And then so I started looking at things to fix that. And it was through the journey of looking into things to fix that that I discovered this this condition. Now, spoiler
Oh.
alert, I didn't actually have clitoral atrophy, or at least not significant clitoral atrophy, but it was learning about that that made me start taking all of it more seriously because I knew about muscular atrophy, right? And I knew
Yeah.
about
Right.
bone
Uh-huh.
atrophy. And so suddenly I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do to avoid that atrophy? Like
Right.
what do I need to do? So yeah,
Yeah.
it led to a whole thing. And I I I am a doer. I am an action taker. So as you can imagine, I was ordering devices and creams. Like I was on and
Yeah.
ordering whatever I could find and listening to podcasts and reading books and figuring it out. And through that journey, realized that I'd probably been in perimenopause a long time. I had previous symptoms, but because I was looking for hot flashes and period changes and brain fog and insomnia,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I had not recognized the other things. So the podcast was born out of this idea that as I called my friends, they didn't know either. And as I
Wow.
learned more, I realized, wow, we don't even know. We don't even
Mm.
know what things could be the beginning of this cascade of symptoms and hormone changes.
Right.
And we don't even know which ones are just a stage you go through, like traits of perimenopause, and which ones are symptoms of a deficiency or which ones you can manage or any of that. And we can go in and get treated for these things. Like, I mean, I don't want to talk this whole time and not let you talk, but for
No, you're
instance,
good.
heart palpitations,
Right.
super common. I had in my 40s, not one doctor that I saw and tested me and kind of suggested that maybe I just had anxiety. Not one of these doctors said, "Hey, by the way, you're 46.
Yeah.
Um, this is a common symptom of the change."
Yeah.
Not one of them did. Instead, they just let me worry. They let me go in for all these tests, and then they said I was fine. And you know, have you ever been treated for anxiety? Right? Kind
Right.
of gaslighting me a little bit instead of saying, "Hey, by the way, these things are not dangerous. We've
Mhm.
checked you out, but just so you know, at 46, your estrogen's dropping, and that's could be this."
Right. And then, like, of course, if you get on the Google machine, like, it's death and destruction for sure. Like, everything is ruined and yeah. That's
Yeah.
scary. I didn't even realize that you can okay, first of all, I'm not a very good girl. Like, I'm, like, not very girly when it comes to, like I just kinda, like, skate through the girl stuff and then, like, and it's like then something happens and I'm like, "Oh, shit, I gotta deal with this." So, like, talking about this perimenopause stuff, like, I didn't even realize, Gabby, that, like, between 35 and 45 is when perimenopause can happen, and I've been having symptoms coming up, and they're, like, just these random wacky things, and and I listened to your podcast, in one episode, they say, like, it's all disjointed and disconnected, and you don't realize that it is not disjointed and disconnected. It's actually all perimenopause. And I'm like, okay. Because, you think
Wow.
like not remembering the name for Skype, or
Yeah.
forgetting the chili bean can, when you're going grocery shopping, having to go back to the store the next day, you think, oh, we have Alzheimer's in my family. And that's scary to think about, and so like you worry that that is like what's happening. But no, I'm probably in perimenopause. I'm also a little bit kind of, um, like, I'm kind of done with going to doctors right now. Like, I am just over it. I even have, like, a female OBGYN. She didn't deliver my kids because we moved down to Florida, so she's new and she's great. But, I mean, honestly, like, I still feel like she's still trying to doctor me. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's just doctoring me. And I had, like, a issue, and I don't know if I shared this with you guys. But a couple years ago, I was about to cut my commercial demo. I'd been training for a long time with my group. We were all meeting in Vegas, and and I was getting ready to hopefully cut my demo in person when I went to Vegas to travel, and I had a little bit of a cancer scare. Like I was like bleeding for like 30 days and I didn't know what was going on. I went to the doctor and they like want to run all these tests, and so it turns out that I had to have surgery, and I put surgery off because I wanted to still go on my trip, and it turned out that I didn't record my demo in person because I just wasn't quite ready. But, mentally I was probably a little bit messed up in my head anyway, so it was a good thing I didn't. But, it turns out I'm okay. Like, that wasn't part of my story. I did have to have, they had to remove some of my lady parts. They had to remove, like, my fallopian tube. Actually, they took out both, just to be safe. But I was like, "Just take it all out." And I'm glad that the doctor said no, because I would have been forced right into, like, early menopause after listening to some of your podcasts. But, part of me was just like, "Take it all." But they had no rhyme or reason. Everything was fine, and and yay, that's good. But I'm just like, I gotta take better care of myself. I gotta be better about being a better woman, especially in this stage of life, you know? And, plug your ears, Lloyd. Like, I think you don't realize that even if you have a partner, like, I've been with my husband for 21 years. We just celebrated our 19th anniversary, wedding anniversary. I'm kind of at this age and stage in life where I'm like, I could, like, give or take, like, the physical side of things. Like, I'm kinda like, "Well, and that was never the case before. We had a pretty healthy relationship, and I was also very conscientious of, like, men are very physical beings. They like to be physical. That's, like, their love language, and women are more, like, mental and that kinda stuff. But some women love sex physically too, but, like, not me. And so it's been messing with my head a little bit, you know? And then when you try
Yeah.
to reinvent yourself and you're doing on-camera stuff or you're doing voiceover stuff, like, when things aren't aligning in the rest of your life, it's hard to align in your business too. Anyways, now I'm just on a rampage there, but
Well, it's true.
I
It's hard to show up. What were you saying, Gabrielle?
sorry,
sorry.
sorry. I was just gonna say that's why your podcast is so important because women's health isn't talked about as much, not through a woman's perspective, I feel. And there's so much that we still don't know yet. Like one of my friends a couple months ago had pain in her right breast. Turned out she had a plugged duct, and her husband helped her out with that, but it was due to menopause.
Oh,
I haven't
really?
heard that one yet. I'm going to add it to my list.
Like,
Yeah,
she
I
wasn't
didn't know either. I wasn't aware that could happen. She was like, "Yeah, hold your breath. I'm gonna tell you something." And I'm like, "What?" And she's in her 50s. She's like, "This happened to me, and it's due to menopause." And I'm like, "What?"
she had a clogged milk duct in her 50s, so she wasn't actually actively
She had a
breastfeeding.
clogged. Exactly.
You know
She
what?
wasn't actively breastfeeding, and she had a plugged milk duct in her 50s.
Oh my God.
More the merrier. Hey, Angela, we're talking about plugged milk ducts in your 50s, in your boobs.
Here
Due
it
to
is.
menopause.
Perfect time to join.
Yes. I
Hi,
didn't
Martha.
know that
Sorry
could
I'm late. I
happen.
apologize.
That's okay. Hi.
So
How
the
are
more
you?
women,
Good.
we can get, hi Angela,
Hi.
that we can get to like talk about all their symptoms and everything that's going on and everything that we think might be like wrong with us, which is actually not true. It could happen to other women, the better. That way we can understand our bodies a little more and relate to each other.
Yeah.
I love it, life coach Gabby. I love that because we need to. I mean, we need to band together. When you
Exactly.
separate women from each other, like it weakens our forces. But like when we band together, look out. Look the f out. And it's
Yes.
and I don't know. I mean, I was listening to Ducky that one episode. If anybody goes back and listens to My Aloof Vagina, you have to listen to the Ducky episode because well, it's not called Ducky, but I think it's like I'm like looking to see what episode it was. I think it was episode 11 in the most recent like bunch of your podcast episodes. And well, no, you're a fairly new podcast, right? Or no, this is
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I recorded the early episodes years ago, and this never launched the podcast for reasons we
Right.
can discuss. But um, yeah, so I officially launched on Valentine's Day.
Oh,
So
wow.
very recent.
That was a great episode though, and she was really cool and dynamic, and I loved what she said. She's like, sex doesn't have to be penetration, right? There's so many other forms of sex. It could be like just different kinds of intimacy and stuff like that. And I think people forget that, like, I don't know. I mean, it's like you feel bad when you're going through perimenopause or menopause, and you always think like there's something wrong with you, and there's really nothing wrong with us. We're just changing. And I love how you highlight all of that, because in the different episodes, and I love how I don't know, like expectations and realizing that you're not alone, like what Gabby was touching on, and just having these conversations is so important, you know? How did you
Yeah.
meet Ducky? Is she like a sex therapist or something?
She is. She's a certified sex educator, amongst other things. But Ducky Doolittle, she and I met, gosh, 2005 maybe.
Okay.
And she was brought in to do some sex education for a company I worked with. I was at the time selling sex toys, running romance workshops.
Nice.
You
Rock
know,
on.
that fits, right? No one's surprised. And she had a particular approach that I just found so appealing. And you heard her. She's really amazing. She's a light. She
Yeah.
also is so pragmatic and informed, but the way she talks about it kind of helps remove that feeling like something's wrong with me. Like her
Mhm.
approach is always about, I remember, I haven't talked about this on the podcast, but when I met her and, I was a little bit squeamish. I was pretty straight laced. I was straight laced sex educator, straight laced sex toy seller. And I
How does that
remember talking
how
to
does
her
that
about our
happen?
products. We just like rolled out a bunch of, anal toys, and I needed to teach about it. And I was kind of like,
Funny.
and she said, why aren't she would not be embarrassed by this, but I'm all embarrassed. But she said, why aren't you having anal sex with your boyfriend? Because he really wanted it, right? And I said, oh my gosh, he's just driving me crazy. And she said, Martha, anal sex is like yoga for your butt.
Oh my
It's
God.
like yoga for your butt. people who people who do things with their butts have less butt problems. And I was like, what? She's like, I'm telling you, it helps with circulation, it helps with all of your pelvic floor muscles, and they're all intertwined. And so you don't have to do anything crazy, but doing stuff with your butt is a health activity.
Oh
And I
my
remember
God.
just thinking, there's no one else on the planet who would present it that way to me and who I would believe. Right. It
Right.
wasn't just a shtick. This is her belief, and this is what she was going with. So I started saying it in my parties with no experience of my own at the time, right?
Yeah.
Guys, anal sex is like yoga for your butt. And I sold so many toys,
That's
but they'd already
hilarious.
been asking in the order room. I just didn't have any personal experience to share with them. And so I felt limited, and she helped equip me and provide the guidance and the support and the education so that I could respond to really what were the interests of my clientele, right? They wanted to know. They wanted things. They wanted to know what was safe. They wanted to know what they could use. They wanted to know what was okay, what wasn't okay, how to approach it, all those things. And I wasn't in a position to serve them from personal experience, which wasn't isolated, but that's the one that I remember. That's the area where I didn't have experience, where I just remember the lessons, and I just turned around and went and helped people. I went like,
Yeah.
Johnny Appleseed, but I was like Johnny Butt Plug, going out there helping the people change their lives,
Oh my God. How did you get into sex toys? I just met someone. I went to Vegas recently, and that's where Lloyd is at. He does improv now, like live improv. Part of his training to get to his commercial demo, and he's amazing. And like one of the gals in like one of the troops, she's a sex toy person. So I'm like, how do you fall into that? Like, like I'm starting to get, I feel like I'm kind of an open and free person, but like you start talking about butt plugs, and I'm like, oh my God, what's that? What's happening
Yeah.
right now?
That's why I almost didn't want to talk about it here, but that's
No,
the end
we're
of our
good.
the butt plug section of this interview. But I got into them because you know what? Sex toys are health adjacent. And I've always been very health focused and health education focused and science focused. And so at the time it was very lucrative. When I first found it, I just knew it was lucrative. And I thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Because it was
Right.
basically, and Lloyd, you'll appreciate this. Maybe you all will. You're probably all in the same kind of area I'm in. It was 2 45-minute stand-up sets about sex toys. You know what I mean? It was a warm up. It was almost like, a little warm up the crowd. I would refer to the jokes from the first half, the second half, and I was just using the toys as teaching instruments, but also as comic foils for this performance.
Right.
And I think that's what appealed to me. And then over time, I just learned more and more and shifted the workshop that I designed, I shifted it to include all my jokes, which just get better over time as you do them 3 nights a week, and incorporate the things I was learning from people like Ducky and others.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it happened. I needed the money, and that was money that was as good as stripping, but I didn't have to take my clothes off.
Angela, I think you just found your new side hustle.
I love it. I love it. My question is to you, Martha. Like growing up, was sex like a open conversation in your household at all? No. Yeah,
No.
I think that's like real common amongst this last couple of generations is like we're feeling the need to be more open with our family members. Like I have a 13-year-old son, not that like that's like top dinner topics or anything like that, but I never really had talks that early on, and I feel like my son and I like it's more of an open conversation. If he does have questions, we talk about it, but I think it's important to have those people in your lives that you can like turn to and be like, hey, like I have questions about this. Can you help me
Yeah.
through it? And whether that's somebody in your household or somebody you find outside, those realms, it's really important, especially with everything that's going on in sex today.
100%. And listen, when my son was little, we had books like Everybody Poops.
Right.
Right.
And,
Right.
toddlerhood is too early to like introduce a book like Everybody F's. But
Right.
the truth is
You need
that
to
it's
write that.
I
You need
know,
to
but
write that. That's
but it's look at me. Aren't you impressed with how I'm editing myself on your show instead of on my own show where I drop the F-bomb all the time?
you can say fuck. That's fine.
Okay, awesome. Well, anyway, so Everybody Fucks. There isn't a book like that for children, and it's not appropriate. But for adults or people reaching adulthood, the idea that sex is just a natural part of what we do.
Right.
We're all here as a result of sex, and the more open you can be about it, the less dramatic it has to be in your life. It can just be an enhancement and something pleasurable, and you can incorporate it as much as you want. And some people, like we were talking about earlier, Jaws, like some people are more into it and it's more their thing. It's more like a thread through their lives. And some people, it's just one of the things they do. There's a whole spectrum. And if we're open about it and open about the truth about it, then we can all kind of relax into what feels best for us. Instead, the secrecy makes us think either no one else is having sex and we're dirty,
Right.
or everyone else is having great sex and we suck and what's wrong with our relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you, Angela. I think people need to find a way to talk about it. And especially with their kids as they get older,
Yeah.
just set the expectations.
Yeah.
So that they're not finding out on the street corner or, on their gaming device with the adults they're playing with, right?
Exactly.
Something
Oh
like
my
that.
God. My man babe was like, if I had access to the internet stuff that like, our kids have access to, he was like, I would have the best time ever. And I'm like, oh my God, thanks for reminding me about that. But it's interesting though, because it's like having open conversations about menopause, perimenopausal, about sex, like I don't even think I knew what an orgasm was. Like, I don't even think I knew what that was until my adulthood. I was like, oh, what? And sorry, Lloyd, but it's like, I know you have your mom and your sisters and stuff, but it's like, I just didn't know about it, and even now, like my mom has been gone for over 10 years now. And, she passed away rather early. And it's like, I have a stepmom and I don't really talk to her anymore. So it's like, and she's not even like biological, so she wouldn't, be able to, whatever she would share with me about her, you know, as she gets older, wouldn't really apply to me. So I have an aunt, I have 2 aunts, but it's like still like I think one had an early hysterectomy and like she's like, in like in my family we never talk about anything, like nobody talk when I was younger, I talk so much all the time. Lloyd mentioned this before too. He talks a lot when he was little too. It's like I talk so much, people will be like, "What's wrong with you?" You know, like, and I was super sensitive and all this stuff, and it was always like, "What's wrong with you?" And now I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with me, but what's wrong with you? Like, why are we not talking about this shit?" Like now I feel like I have all this catching up to do, and I'm raising three boys. You know, so I'm discovering things that I should be talking to them about that nobody talked to me about. And figuring it out as I go, and like we need to stop that, you know, like
Yeah.
we need to like
And I
edu-
think it, to bring Lloyd into the conversation, like I think it's important for men to understand this kind of stuff about women because it's been such a taboo subject. Like, oh, she's just going, it's her time of the month, la la la. Like,
yeah.
understand this is biology, bro. Like, I'm not just
Yeah.
doing this for fun, man.
Yeah.
Or even just like the whole sex talks, and I feel like a lot of not to put men on the spot, but a lot of men get a lot of their sexual knowledge from porn, and that's not completely true. All of that is not the basis stuff. So to hear real women talk about their real experiences and how you know pleasure plays a factor, and how the health factor comes into everything as well, like I think that's tremendous for men to understand
Hmm.
in general. So like when we have podcasts like yours that look like they're directed towards just women, which yeah, that is the primary demographic, but to have a man sit down and listen to this stuff and be like, you know, open their mind to the idea that this is, biological situation for women to go through, or just the ideas that come with sex for women.
Yeah.
I think it's important for
Yeah.
men to know that. What
I
do you
mean,
think, Lloyd?
especially, oh, yeah, Lloyd.
So I'm gonna say something that you guys don't know about me, and that is that
Ooh,
this is not a new situation for me.
good, good,
Oh,
good.
good.
And like most of the people in my life, period, are women, but I personally like I get weird in there are two situations where I get weird. One, when I'm the only black person, and two, when I'm the only guy, right? And so I'm just like, I don't want to, because I will go on and on and on, and I don't want to hijack the conversation. It's like when you're like,
Appreciate
oh,
that.
sex isn't about penetration. Well, statistically, most women don't orgasm from penetration anyway. But
Right.
like, those are things that people don't know. Why? Because we don't talk about it. Why don't we talk
Mhm.
about it? Because it's taboo. But also, I mean, and I don't necessarily saying that a book like, people fuck is inappropriate for kids is like, okay, you can say it's inappropriate, but at the same time, the best way to combat any form of I can't even think of the word right now.
Ignorance.
Yeah, well, just the education, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh,
Okay.
teen pregnancy. Okay, well, it doesn't happen in countries where they're educating kids about it, you
Right,
know.
Right.
Mm,
right.
Um, and it's I don't know.
Education's key. It
Yeah,
is.
Yeah.
Karen,
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
And you know what? There is something to be said about the different cultures too. Like black women don't experience, sex the same way as a white woman or a Latina, Yeah, there's different aspects that can be the same, but there's different modes of education that comes with different cultures.
Yeah.
right.
So I think it's important for everybody to have a little bit of knowledge about what's going on in their own culture and in their own sex lives in general. So I think that's very important to have
I have
podcasts
a
like this.
And
question for Martha. Like in this whole like podcasting experience and your journey and stuff like that, outside of the butt plug story, I mean, like what I had to bring that back in. But like, what was something that like was surprising that you learned about, whether just from bringing on different guests where, you're just kind of like, wow, I didn't realize that that's something that could occur, or like what is like something like what is something that was unexpected that you found out about where you were like, oh, and you had this aha moment?
With the menopause part of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
just that.
So I honestly, when you and I first met, I think we even talked about it at that our brief falling in love with each other at the cocktail
I
party.
know, right? I was like,
Um,
we need to talk.
I had just at that event coined the concept or coined the term for me so I could start to sort things in my brain of calling it the canary in the coal mine. Because every woman I talked to at that, because, you can't really walk around. I couldn't really walk around a podcast conference with a name badge that said my Aloof Vagina on it without causing a stir. And
Yes.
because
That's
people are
hilarious.
curious and they're like, what? And
That's funny.
and there was an assumption it was a sex podcast, of course, which kind of it is, but only because
It deals with
sex is related to
vaginas. Yeah.
vaginas,
Yeah.
right? And vaginas
Right.
are related to perimenopause. And it is all sex related, which I also think back to Lloyd and the whole taboo, this idea that I think one of the reasons we don't talk about perimenopause, we don't know about it, is because it's so sex adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so doctors can't talk about it with us the way they should. And we don't talk about it with amongst each other because it's so sex adjacent. You might stumble into sex talk if you're talking about hormones,
Right.
right? Or talking about any of the symptoms. So it's super challenging. And I look forward to things changing and it becoming more open. But at the podcast conference, once a woman came up and talked to me about it, I asked them, like, what was your first thing? What was the first clue for you? When did you first think, oh, maybe I am going through this thing? And of all the women I talked to, not one had the same one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not one had the same one. I was keeping my
Yeah.
little list in my head. I just added one to my list, the clogged milk duct because of this, right? But I had this list and some of the things I'd heard of before, but none of them named the same one. And then I started kind of equating it to this giant playlist. This was a surprise to me. And this has been a really delightful discovery because it makes me feel less like I was just individually dumb and ignorant when I didn't know about it. That it's like this massive playlist and we all get the same playlist, but we all get a different shuffle. And so we may not all get all of the same symptoms in this span during this kind of reverse puberty season, but it is all on a massive list. And so we can relate to each other and connect because all of us on here may all be people who end up experiencing hot flashes, although that we might not get it in the same sequence with other symptoms. And if we could just figure out a way to publish the playlist or be more open about the playlist, then we wouldn't be kind of wandering around not knowing that that's what we were experiencing. And we wouldn't be susceptible to doctors who just want to get us out of the office because we've already hit their 18-minute limit. And the easiest thing to do is really, prescribe an antidepressant.
Yeah.
To get us to stop whining and asking questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And talk everything up to anxiety when anxiety is actually one of the symptoms.
Right.
And that's
So,
amazing that you
yeah.
brought that up because it was like I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty good with my anxiety right now. I've had, that's a whole other story, but every once in a while it rears its ugly head. And then I'm like, oh, aha, I'm about to get my period. Okay. Or like you have like a night sweats. I'm like, oh my God, am I in menopause? And it's like, no, it's like right before my period. And it's like just these weird random things that are happening. And yeah, by the way, like I choosing a female OBGYN, I thought she would be like less doctory and like more like in tune with me, but that's just not the case. And I have to tell you, I am tired of them being like, oh, you'll be fine. Like, where in the hell? Why would okay, let's get you up on the table. Let's do a biopsy for you with no medicine or maybe a little bit of light medicine. Like let's do an ablation in office. How about you have one of those in the office with no medicine and tell me that doesn't hurt like a son of a bitch. Like I'm like just don't get it. Like the medical community and like the whole concept of going and having like getting tested and like having your exams and stuff like that, it's barbaric. You make me get completely naked. I sit there in a paper gown for God knows how long. And then you're going to come in with like metal things and like poke and prod me. Like, this is terrible. I got to the point where I actually spoke up and I said, I am not getting undressed until I know the doctor is right outside that door. And when they knock, I will get undressed and I'll get in a paper gown because I am not waiting here butt ass naked with the paper gown on me. I'm not
No.
doing it. And you know what? Don't talk to me. You get in there and do your business, and then I'll get dressed and talk to you. I like flipped the script on them because I'm like, what? I do not want to sit here and talk to you about myself in a paper gown, completely naked. It's just the whole experience is terrible. It's just
I think it's absurd how they don't consider our pain, the pain that we feel as women. I got what is it called? The device that they stick inside of you. So it's for birth control. IUD.
IUD.
IUD. And my nurse had to convinced, like she had a discussion with my doctor to give me an anesthesia pill
Yeah.
for that. And he was like, no, she'll be fine. She's like, no, you have no idea what it's like. Give it to her, please. And he's like, oh, it can't be that bad. I took the pill. We waited about half an hour. You know, he did the procedure. It hurt like hell. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs. My husband's like freaking out. And the doctor's like, really, is that bad? I'm like, yes, it's that bad. And I took the pill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff.
I mean, it's the standard of care is to not give anything for it. And it is painful. And who's deciding the standard of care? Who's deciding what the threshold of pain that is appropriate or permissive? Like, oh, this only reaches here, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's outrageous, really.
It is.
It is barbaric.
It is. Angela, were you gonna? Have you had any?
I mean, I was just thinking. I mean, the whole medical system, in a sense, is pretty barbaric. But when it comes down to, female care, I think it's way behind. I mean, we've all said it. It's way behind, and there needs to be some work done on the whole system for sure.
Yeah. And just the conversation.
Jaws, that's something I did think of that I learned that was a surprise. I do want to share with people. I want women to know this because I didn't know. It's one of the things I learned was that gynecologists are actually surgeons. They're not endocrinologists. They're good at delivering babies. They can do a C-section. They're all trained and qualified to cut you open for a C-section. They're qualified to give you a hysterectomy. They're qualified to go in and take your fallopian tubes. They're qualified to tap an IUD painfully through your cervix, right? But they are not trained in hormones. So they're not the right person to be talking about it. And so that's one of the reasons we go in and they say, well, right? Because they have no expertise and it's not their area. And I didn't know that. I thought the gynecologist was the person I was supposed to go to. She's my lady doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, because of the search for the clitoris thing, I was looking for testosterone because I decided that's what I was going to take and fix it. And so I got hooked up with a doctor who is NAMS certified. It's the National Association of Menopause Society.
Okay.
They have a website called, I think it's menopause. It is menopause.org. And you can actually search and look for certified practitioners who've gone through menopause training specifically and are certified. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And so I had somebody who I was already seeing for things, who was dealing with, my hormones and all the things that were happening and was getting me stabilized. And because I chose to go the HRT route, which is not everybody's choice. But since I have her, I now have a contrast with the gyno. And I have a really good gyno. Like she's really with it. She's thoughtful and great bedside manner and cute and fun. And even she, when I was with her and I had mentioned, I was, because I'd had fibroids before and I did not have a hysterectomy. Like you, I avoided a hysterectomy. I don't know how I thought to say no, thank you, because it would have been the easy answer. But I mentioned to her, oh, I don't know if I might have fibroids again. Can we check? Because I just want to know. And she said off the cuff, knowing nothing about my plans, my desires, my lifestyle, nothing. We're not that close. She said, well, I mean, if you have fibroids, we wouldn't do a myomectomy again. We just give you a hysterectomy. She kind of like made this little sit. And I thought, I've been talking to enough women to know that then there were fighting words for me.
Right.
But I have a different doctor who would never, ever dream of making a call like that without discussing it all with me. And I don't have to rely on this doctor. So I just didn't say anything. And she mentioned it again and I left. And I just thanked my lucky stars that I knew that were alternatives and that there were doctors who could deal with this change and this shift either holistically and naturally or with pharmaceuticals who are trained. And I'm not going to be going to this lady for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, I just want to, because I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
I didn't either.
That's crazy.
I would
Yeah.
I
be
mean, it
no.
makes sense though. It like makes sense though that they're, I mean, they deliver babies. They can do C-sections. They're surgeons. That makes
But it
sense.
does not make sense that they don't know anything about women hormones.
Yeah. Well, they
Or
probably know
have the
some.
empathy.
Right.
Yeah.
The empathy.
Empathy
It's
too.
just it's outside their expertise, so they can't really manage it. I think it's more that they say like to a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. To a
Mm,
surgeon, of course, they're right. You know how you could fix my fibroids if I had them again?
yeah.
Just take out my
Yeah.
my uterus,
Yeah.
right?
Scrape it
Yeah.
on
If you
out.
had no
Yeah.
concept of what contribution that might make to my whole health system or my hormones,
right.
yeah,
Right.
because you would know what an easy surgery. It's an easy to get approved by insurance
Right.
surgery.
Yeah.
So of course that's her answer because she's thinking in terms of her expertise.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you cover so much of this too on your podcast. Like, I feel like we can't even. I mean, we're just like literally like an
Dipping our
iceberg.
toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scratching
I
the
mean,
surface. Yeah.
There's, I mean, brain fog and anxiety, and then there's also like, diastasis recti and pelvic floors. I mean, and all kinds of stuff. That like, there's just everything. And I like I said, I haven't been a very good female. Like I know I'm probably in perimenopause. I just kind of stick my head in the sand about it because I just don't want to deal with it. I keep putting off my monthly or my yearly exam, and probably need to go get a breast exam or whatever. What is it? The mammogram. I need to go
Mammogram.
do that. I'm coming up on the age where I need to get like a colonoscopy. I probably should have had one done before COVID, but COVID happened. I haven't gotten back into it. But like Ducky was right. She's like, you have to advocate for yourself in whatever journey or direction or path that you take, whether it's like, holistic or you go the medical route. Like, you do need to stay on top of things. And like you're talking about, you need to exercise and move your body. And it's not just for the here and now, it's for the future.
Yeah.
And having these open conversations with friends and sharing stories, makes you feel a little less weird, I guess.
Yeah. And as long as you get your colonoscopy, like that's even more important probably than your annual because unless you've had abnormal pap smears, you don't have to have one of those every year. But that colonoscopy could save your life.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
know. I needed it was like 50 at 50, like at 50, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Yeah, unless you have like
Mm-hmm.
family history. I think you have to do it
Yeah.
before. Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I think it's like you can go to like 3 years or 5 years for your annual or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you have things that are in your family. So there I have like things in my family. We have uterine
Oh
cancer
yeah.
and yeah, that kind of stuff. Which is one of the reasons why my doctor was like really aggressive about that fallopian tube situation because they had to get in there and make sure there wasn't something else going on, which thank God there wasn't. And as I was walking to get my results after I gotten back from Vegas, my first trip, walking to the doctor's office, I don't know what it was, but I was just like, this is not part of my story. I'm going to be okay.
Mhm.
And so when I walked in and she, validated that thought and everything was okay, but it's like, shit happens to your body and you're like, what? Why? Like, what is this? And just being able to have these conversations, especially with amongst men and women friends, it just makes me feel a little bit better. Cause a lot of times my husband will look at me and he'll be like, somebody's getting their period. And I'm like, I am going to throat punch you right now. You better run. And now I'm going to be like, somebody's having perimenopausal issues. So,
What I have a question. After they took out your fallopian tubes, did that fix the bleeding?
it did for a minute. And some things are starting to, rear their ugly head a little bit. And it did disrupt my monthly flow and other things too. And I think some hormone stuff has been disrupted as well that I have to probably look into. But again, just sort of ignoring things, which is part of, I think, with women too. Like we end up in these emergency situations because we ignore signs and symptoms because we're taking care of our men or we're taking care of our kids or we're taking care of family members. And we always put ourselves last, which is another part of the conversation. We really need to put ourselves first at some point in time, or at least at the same level as everybody else around us, because yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think we should think about it more like you should do it if you're taking care of your kids, you should do it for them.
Yeah.
You want to live long enough to see your grandkids, or maybe not your grandkids, but your kids all grown up.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Well, Martha, if anybody wants to like get a hold of you or like wants to listen to your podcast because we're coming around to that time and We could always have you come back too. We could always pick another.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We could have a whole butt plug episode if you want to. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen, I promised that the butt plug stuff was over, that the anal portion of the program was over, but we just keep revisiting
I'm
it.
sorry.
I
It's
don't know.
just too fun.
You can always find me at myaloofvagina.com. All the podcast episodes are available there. Of course, I'm on Instagram and all the places, but if you go there, you can find it. You can get to the YouTube and all of those things. And that's the best place. And then you can listen to the show or watch it wherever you listen or watch the podcast. It's on all the platforms.
That's awesome.
So,
How long have you been in voiceover? One last question.
oh gosh, my first voiceover would have been in 1988.
Wow.
So you've been doing it a
But
while.
because they wanted a young voice and they had me reading ad copy at a local radio station. And then I went to college. I ran the college station and, dealt the bumpers and things like that and got a job at a local radio station and then was on the air there. And at the first station, so this is 1992, the first station, I was one of only 2 women in the building because it was a rock station. And I do that any ad, like if McDonald's needs a female lead or female read, I was the only one there. They weren't outsourcing any of that kind of stuff. And so I got to do a lot of that, a lot of little business updates, a lot of things. And then when I went to another station and when I ultimately left radio, I moved to print because I couldn't earn I was a single mom. So I had my son and I couldn't earn what I needed to on the radio. So I switched to print, and the association where I was working for a magazine had a broadcast department and they needed people to voice things. And so my career kind of went that way. Wherever I worked, I was the person voicing whatever we were doing. We never hired someone outside, or if it was e-learning, as they used to call it then, e-learning platforms. And I would voice those things and get hired to do that, or industrial stuff all around the Washington, D.C. area.
That's so cool.
So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you do have a very bright and natural and really pretty
Smooth.
voice. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very nice to listen to. So I could see e-learning for sure.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Voiceover is cool. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks,
Thank
guys,
you
for
for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And thank you for creating your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I love doing it. And I love, people write me messages and I just think, oh my gosh, this is why I'm doing it. Cause you know how it is. If you guys have a podcast, some weeks, mine's every week. Some weeks I am pushing to get it done and get it up and get all the things done, all the things you have to do around it. And it can be kind of thankless a little bit.
Yes.
The part that's not talking to the friends on the
Yeah.
thing. And then I'll get a note from someone who tells me something like they learned something from it, or they went and got something checked already and it's only been around for a few months, or that they'd felt alone and then they heard someone's story on the show and now they're like, oh my gosh, I went through that too.
That's great.
So yeah, thanks for thanking me because you're welcome. And I feel like it's something important for me and I'm so happy it's helping other people. I wish it had been around for me. That's why I created it. I wish there'd been a fun way to learn about things, not the serious, dramatic versions, because I, like you, Jaws, like you, Jaws, I was avoiding a lot of things and just thinking I was still 25.
Yes.
And the number one thing I like to avoid is just the woe is me kind of commiseration, sad places. And that's where all the info was when I went to look. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really, I don't want my pain body to be, leading this. I don't want to be suddenly identifying myself as tired, old, dried up and decrepit. And, oh, I've been so wronged. I didn't want to shift my energy in that way for my life. I wanted to go into this laughing and facing it, head on, but also enjoying it and, enjoying the parts of it that are great.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted to create for other people, kind of a light but informative show.
I think that's awesome.
And it's inspiring. And as for us that are younger, I didn't realize there were so many things that could happen to your body until I went through pregnancy. And then I was like, okay, that pregnancy fantasy, you're going to be happy the whole time is fake.
Yeah.
There's so many things that go through your body that nobody talks about. And then you feel alone and everything. And that's just going to continue if I don't educate myself. So the fact that there are women like you that create podcasts like this really help us. Like
Yes.
you guys are trailblazers,
Yeah.
and thank you so much for that.
And
Oh
it's
my
almost like
gosh.
too, like it's like a shift of mindset too, because like I feel like the women before me, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm getting old," and then they go into that whole old mindset, and it's like, no, I'm not. I'm not old. I'm just getting older, like, and I want to enjoy being older, So I like that shift in the mindset with the podcast too. So
Yeah.
thank you, thank you,
Thank you. I'll let you guys go. Thanks for
Yeah,
hosting me while I was in the treehouse, and I hope the
yes,
tech was
Gorgeous.
okay.
in the
It's
woods.
Thank you
Fun.
for joining from your fancy treehouse.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know, right?
Yes.
Amazing.
I wanna
I
come
wish it were
hang out.
mine. It's really, I can act like it's mine because it's a family treehouse. But yeah. Well, have a
Awesome.
great time. Thank you so much. I hope I get to come
Yes.
back again.
Yes, we'll
Yeah,
have to have you come
definitely.
back. Hang
Yeah,
tight for
definitely.
1 second.